Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following.
A special vigil was held by friends and family in Lethbridge recently, highlighting the 3-year anniversary of the disappearance of Marshall Iwasa. The president of the Justice Centre has reached out to Premier Daniel Smith on behalf of a client he says will die unless the province steps in. And a powerful message from an Indigenous pastor who discusses the power of God's healing touch when we've lost someone special.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Marshall Iwasa was just 27 years old when he disappeared 3 years ago, and his family is still searching for answers. Lethbridge police say there are no updates as to where he could possibly be. An awareness vigil was held by family members of Iwasa on Friday evening. Video journalist Micah Quinn was there and spoke with Iwasa's mother and sister, who say the hardest part is not knowing where their missing loved one could be after all of these years.
The heartbreak of not knowing where Marshall is overwhelming.
Tammy Johnson and Paige Fogan had tears in their eyes as they talked about the disappearance of Marshall Iwasa to a crowd of family members, friends, and members of the community. Iwasa has been missing since November 17th of 2019. Lethbridge police say there is currently no new information on the case and the file remains open. The mother of Iwasa, Tammy Johnson, recalled the last time she saw her son before he went missing.
Marshall came down and I knew that he was going to the storage locker because that's what he said he was coming to Lethbridge for. So he stopped at my house to help with my computer, and we sat in my kitchen and had a pop, and he sat right beside me. I had no idea what was about to come and happen. And then he went to the storage unit. We know he went to the storage unit. And that was the last time that we heard or saw anything of Marshall.
Lethbridge police say Iwasa's burnt truck was found at the end of a logging road in a remote area in BC's backcountry near Pemberton on November 23rd of 2019. His truck is still there 3 years later.
It's another strange aspect of this, that Marshall's truck is still up there.
Iwasa is described by his family as quiet and shy, and the kind of person that would help anyone if they were in need. Paige Fogan, Iwasa's sister, says the family is still looking for him, and they've been working with private investigators from the start to try and find him.
They've continued to work with us and support our family the entire time. So whether there's leads to follow up on or questions that we have or even just navigating the system, they've been there to support us.
If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Marshall Iwasa, you can contact Lethbridge Police or submit a tip through Crime Stoppers. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Many of us across southern Alberta were shocked by the disappearance and murder of Tia Blood. But whether it's missing and murdered Indigenous women or someone else close to you, losing a family member can be painful and often unbearable. Deborah Manous is an Indigenous pastor in Edmonton. She recently shared some tips on how to heal and move forward in a place of peace after losing someone very close to you.
I found the most important thing is to acknowledge that I went through a loss, to acknowledge that I am going through grief, and that I need to look at the areas that had been very key in my life with this person, this individual. And it helped me to grieve. It helped me to accept it and to move forward, because we do have to live our life as well.
Pastor Manous will also discuss the importance of family in times of grief and turmoil. You can catch the full interview with BCN's Naveen Day coming up later on in our show. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is calling on the Smith government here in Alberta to change some healthcare policy. In particular, allowing those who've been unvaccinated against the COVID-19 virus to receive life-saving organ transplants. John Carpe is the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. He joins us now from Calgary to discuss this in more detail. Now, John, this stems from a case involving Sheila Lewis, who was allegedly taken off of a life-saving organ transplant list when doctors at an Alberta hospital said she cannot receive a transplant unless she got the jab?
So there's an ethical principle of informed voluntary consent that needs to be applied to all medical treatments. And here we've got Alberta Health Services blatantly violating that by pressuring this lady to get the COVID vaccine and telling her that unless she does so, she will be kicked off the organ transplant waiting list. So she's going to die. We are not yet successful in the courts. We've had some setbacks. However, Premier Danielle Smith can solve this problem tomorrow simply by instructing Alberta Health Services to stop discriminating against Sheila Annette Lewis and other organ transplant patients.
Now, you sent a letter to Alberta Health Services demanding that Ms. Lewis not be removed from her position on the transplant list. Where does it stand now? Have they gotten back to you?
We have not had a positive response yet from Alberta Health Services, but this is why we're urging people to contact Premier Danielle Smith, because she has that authority along with the Health Minister, Jason Copping, and the two of them are in a position to instruct Alberta Health Services to stop this lethal discrimination against patients that are on organ transplant waiting lists.
Okay, thanks so much, John. That was John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining us from Calgary. The director of Canada's Intelligence Service told the Prime Minister he supported Ottawa's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act last February. Now, despite his opinion that protest blockades across the country did not meet the service's strict definition of a threat to Canadian security, David Vigneault testified that he recommended the invocation of the act. Political reporter Brian Lilly joins us now from Toronto to talk more about the testimony today. Brian, you say Vigneault actually contradicted himself?
Well, we saw the report that was discussed extensively last week, the official report from CSIS saying that the Freedom Convoy did not meet the test of a threat to national security. This is important because the Emergencies Act says a threat to national security is defined by Section 2 of the CSIS Act. And in this extensive report, Vigneault went through, I believe there's 5 different criteria to determine whether something is a threat to national security. He went through each of them and said, it doesn't meet the threshold on this one, et cetera, et cetera. He also included in that report a statement saying that he worried that invoking the Emergencies Act would create more extremists, that people would just say, well, if I can't even protest, I may as well turn to violence. He thought that was a real concern. I'm not sure he's wrong, because people got really upset at protests being shut down. But all these things are said, and then he turns around and apparently at the end of the cabinet meeting says to the Prime Minister, I think you should invoke the act. Now, he was asked on the stand about this contradiction, and he said, well, I got legal counsel. The Department of Justice lawyers spoke to him. The cabinet spoke to him and convinced him to change his mind.
So, Brian, is Vigneault's message the new government narrative? What are your thoughts?
I think it definitely is. And when we look back at last week's testimony, it started with Rob Stewart, who was then the highest ranking public servant in public safety. He was saying that, look, we heard from other people and they didn't use the CSIS definition. Jody Thomas, the Prime Minister's national security advisor, called the CSIS definition outdated. She hinted that they didn't use that definition. And then Janice Charette, the Prime Minister's clerk of the Privy Council, the top civil servant in the country, she said much the same thing. They didn't use the CSIS definition. They used a broader one. That's not their job as public servants. Their job is to follow the law, advise the government on how to do that. They failed here, but we're going to hear more of it from all the ministers, starting with Bill Blair, all the way to the Prime Minister at the end of the week.
Thanks so much, Brian. That was political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who's been covering the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act taking place in Ottawa. Well, it was nice to experience some mild temperatures again here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, the above seasonal temperature should remain with us for a while?
Yes, all week actually. And for context, just so you know, seasonal right now is anywhere between 2 degrees and -8.5. So we're going to be sitting at least 5 degrees all week. We were at 6 today. Even overnight this evening, we're looking at an overnight low of 1 degree. So still staying above that 0 mark. Into tomorrow, Tuesday, we're looking at a high of 7 with lots of sunshine. We could even get a double-digit day later on this week. I'll be back later on in the show to let you know all about that.
Keep melting all of that snow. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Well, Lethbridge City Hall looks like it's ready for Christmas. A tree lighting took place at City Hall on Monday morning, and Mayor Blaine Higgins says it would not have been possible without the help of city staff. He says many took time out of their busy schedules to help put up and decorate the Christmas tree.
It was staff that came in and volunteered their time, because it was really tough these past few years. It's been difficult with COVID, and so they all came and said, what can we do to get this done earlier? We had it pretty late in the year for our last Christmas tree decoration, but for this, it was great to be able to see them all come out and get together, and it builds that morale as well within the staff here to come out on the Saturday and do that. So they had them and family and friends that joined them to do the decorations.
In the spirit of giving, Higgins says the city will be sending out some donations for the Christmas Hope campaign, which launched last week. Giving is a big part of Christmas, especially to children in need. That is what the Angel Tree campaign is all about here in Lethbridge. Gift bundles are packaged up by volunteers to be distributed out to families who are in need. Officials for the campaign say that last year they gave out gifts to around 3,300 children. This year, they're looking to beat that number and help out around 3,500 kids. The group was also presented with a check of $6,000 on Monday morning, which will go a long way in helping to bring joy to children this Christmas season.
Just like receiving that $6,000 from First Choice, we know, as Trina said, that we can go out and purchase gifts, which we have to do today. We will do it today, and we get discounts from different toy stores, and so it's really helpful. The dollars help us get those special gifts that we don't normally get. They will help a child's wish come true, and that's really important to us for the gift bundle process.
Now, if you're thinking of giving toys for the campaign, staff say that Legos, dolls, science kits, and art supplies are highest on their list. The Parks and Cemeteries Department at the City of Lethbridge is embarking on their Parks Master Plan project with a kickoff of a community survey. The group is looking for feedback from residents on our park system. Parks Planning Manager Chris Witkowski says the master plan is all about what the public wants in terms of the park system here in our city.
Our current master plan was done in 2007, so it's 15 years old. A lot of the recommendations in that plan have been accomplished already. So as we look to the next 15 years for our park system, we really want to know what's working and what's not for the public. We don't build the parks for us in administration, we build them for community use. So to understand what the community is looking for, what they're happy with, what changes they want to see, it really builds the format of the master plan and all the recommendations going forward.
Seeing all those images reminds me how much I really miss summer. And if you're interested in taking part of the survey, you can do so by visiting the City of Lethbridge website. Canadian Blood Services is hosting a special new challenge called Give 3 in 2023. It's all about inspiring people to donate blood and plasma. Now, an official with Canadian Blood Services says the challenge is perfect timing with the Christmas holidays just around the corner.
Definitely over the holidays, we saw lots of people that would come out. There was definitely, the last 2 years have kind of been a little hesitant to go out. People are wanting to do something over the holidays, something to give back. So we do have a number of open appointments in Lethbridge. You can go on blood.ca or you can go on our Give Blood app to book your appointment. But I would say we definitely have an opportunity for people to come as groups and really see our new plasma location that's just on Mayor McGrath Drive.
If you're interested in donating, you can do so by booking online or by calling Canadian Blood Services directly. Delegates from a Métis Nation Saskatchewan meeting endorsed their leadership's call for a withdrawal of the Saskatchewan First Act. The group's executive claims the act ignores the inherent rights of Métis citizens to be consulted on constitutional change that impacts their communities. The legislation looks to amend the Constitution to reassert the province's jurisdiction over its natural resources. It has already been opposed by the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, who say it ignores treaty rights. BC's new Premier David Eby says he wants to hit the ground running. His swearing-in ceremony included announcements of a new $100 cost of living credit on electricity bills. He also made promises on public safety and housing initiatives. Eby also paid tribute to his predecessor, John Horgan.
And John said, look, it's your day. I don't know if you want me there. And this is how humble John is, right? He's like, I don't know if anybody's going to want me at this thing. That's the kind of guy he is, right? Do I want the guy who introduced the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People into law in British Columbia? Do I want the guy who ushered the NDP into a historic majority government? Do I want the guy who laid the groundwork for the first new major social program in our province's recent memory, our child care program? Do I want the guy who took the tolls off the bridge? Yeah, John, I want you to come.
Canadian soldiers helped to mark Latvian independence with a parade through the streets of Riga. The occasion took on added significance as neighboring Russia continues its war on Ukraine. Military officials say Canada is playing an essential role in the Baltic nation.
Today there will be a big parade on the river. So it's going to be a military demonstration because it's the 104th anniversary today of the liberation, and of course having that military parade will be an excellent deterrence message for Russia, but also for the Latvians to celebrate that very important day and say that tell the world that the country is free and it will stay free.
Great to see the work our troops are doing overseas. It was also great to see us above zero again today in southwestern Alberta, and that warming trend should continue this week. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. You know, it was so nice to be above the freezing mark again today here in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we should remain above seasonal this week?
Yes, all week, Hal. As I mentioned before, seasonal right now is anywhere between -8.5 degrees up to 2 degrees. And look at these temperatures all week. We're looking at well above 5. So we're sitting at 7 degrees into Tuesday, 5 degrees on Wednesday. We could see a chance of flurries, though. Lots of sunshine again on Thursday. And look at that temperature on Thursday. We could see double digits right there at 10 degrees. 9 degrees expected on Friday, a high of 5 on Saturday, and Sunday, 1 degree with partly cloudy skies. Should be a nice weekend for us there. 3 degrees, the average high for this time of year, -9. So, I mean, technically we're looking at -8.5 for a low, which kind of gets calculated out to -9 when you round it down. 17 was our high temperature on this day back in 1954, and it was -35 in 1996. The sun rose this morning at 7:52 a.m. and our sunset this evening at 4:42 p.m., giving us 8 hours and 50 minutes of daylight. As we get closer to that winter solstice, those days are getting much, much shorter. Chance of rain on the coast tomorrow. Victoria sitting at 10 degrees, 9 degrees in Vancouver, sitting with heavy rains tomorrow, 15 to 25 millimeters and up to 40 millimeters by the shore there. 4 degrees the high in both Edmonton and Calgary with partly cloudy skies. As we look to the rest of the prairies there in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, we're looking at mainly sunny skies, 0 the high in Saskatoon, 2 the high in Regina and Winnipeg, sitting at 0 degrees. Of course, with the wind chill, going to feel much colder in those prairie cities. Wind sitting at only about 15 kilometers per hour, but still going to feel that nippy wind chill. Toronto sitting at 5 degrees tomorrow with partly cloudy skies. Ottawa, 1 degree, and 0 degree the high in Montreal tomorrow. As we look to the Atlantic coast, we are seeing more precipitation. So we're seeing snowfall in Fredericton tomorrow, 3 degrees the high, chance of showers in Halifax for the high there. Charlottetown also sitting at 2 degrees with a chance of flurries, and we're looking at rain mixed with snow tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a high of 3 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
The union representing workers at Loblaw's distribution centre in Northeast Calgary says almost all of its members received layoff notices in the midst of contract negotiations. Officials with the local Teamsters Union say 527 of the 534 members who work at the distribution centre were notified. The layoffs follow 2 rejections this month of the company's latest contract offer. Members have been without an agreement after their previous contract expired in June. The chief executive of Alta Gas will be stepping down next year. The company, which owns natural gas infrastructure in Western Canada, says Randy Crawford will retire in January, but will continue on as CEO until a successor is named. The Calgary-based company says it is working with external advisors to evaluate internal and external candidates for the top job. Company officials say they will work with Crawford on a smooth transition that ensures its long-term success. New Brunswick seafood giant Cook says it completed the largest acquisition since the family-owned company launched back in 1985. The parent company of Cook Aquaculture says it has acquired all outstanding shares of Australian seafood producer Tassal Group in a deal worth $1.5 billion. The move follows approval by Tassal shareholders and an Australian court. Cook CEO Glenn Cook says the company is thrilled to expand and has welcomed Tassal's 1,700 employees. Elon Musk has reinstated Donald Trump's account on Twitter. That reverses a ban that kept the former U.S. president off of the platform since a mob attacked the U.S. Capitol last January. Musk made the announcement after holding a poll asking Twitter users if Trump's account should be reinstated. It is not clear whether Trump would actually return to the social media site. He's been relying on his own site called Truth Social and said in the past that he would not rejoin Twitter even if his account was restored. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 3 points on the day to finish at 19,977. The Dow was down 45 points to 33,700. The S&P 500 was down 15 on the day to 3949, and the Nasdaq was down 121 points to 11,024. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 35 cents to 79.73 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 47 cents to 6.78 U.S. Gold was down 12 cents to 1737.93 U.S. an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $20.85 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $13.06 per bushel, barley's at $9.91, canola's at $19.09, and corn is at $12.01 per bushel. Live cattle were up 48 cents to $153.55. Feeder cattle January contract was up $1.85 to $182.63, and lean hogs were down 43 cents to $83.80. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.35 U.S.
Recapping one of our top stories, Emergency Preparedness Minister Bill Blair told the Emergencies Act inquiry that he was worried inflammatory language from his cabinet colleagues could incite an inflammatory response from protesters. Blair said he was worried that could prompt more to join the Freedom Convoy last February. He told the inquiry that he tried arranging meetings with politicians from all 3 levels of government, but no one from the Ontario government would attend. You know, losing a loved one can be very, very tough. There are so many questions as to why and how will I deal with this loss. Coming up, a powerful interview with Indigenous pastor Deborah Manous, who discusses how God can help in so many ways. She'll explain in an emotional interview with BCN's Naveen Day shortly. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Come for a festive evening and begin the Christmas season with the Lethbridge Christian Men and Women's Choir's annual Christmas concert, taking place at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church on Friday, December 9th at 7:30 p.m. Hear your favorite Christmas carols and join in the celebration of the birth of Christ in song. A free will offering will be accepted. Do you have a heart to serve our community? Streets Alive Mission is looking for volunteers to help make sandwiches, sort incoming donations, assist with Foot Friday, and many other opportunities to serve, receive training, and to provide support for this important cause of bringing hope to the hopeless. Visit streetsalive.ca to fill out their volunteer application or call 403-320-1159. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Many residents in and around Lethbridge were shocked by the disappearance and murder of Tia Blood. Unfortunately, Tia is one of many missing or murdered Indigenous women. To talk more about the effect this has on the Aboriginal families in our province, we wanted to connect with Pastor Deborah Manous of Edmonton to talk about the struggles and solutions for those families whose loved ones have gone missing or have lost their lives. Deborah, thank you for joining us today to talk about this sensitive issue.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Likewise, Deborah, you are a Christian minister, so we want to start with your role in the community. When you are with a family in pain because they have lost a loved one, where do you even start?
Well, I begin by acknowledging that they are going through grief and that they are going through the pain of losing a loved one. And I ask them to look around who can support them, who it is that they can talk to if they're wanting to talk, because there are different ways that our people, especially the First Nations, like to express their ways of grief. And it isn't necessarily the same as other folks. Sometimes it is, where we get together as a group, we get together as families, we get together, individually as well with other people. So a lot of it is in getting together in the community sense, where we're getting, we're doing maybe feeding, having a meal together, where we're getting together and talking about it, not even talking about it sometimes at first until the person is ready to actually connect. And then also going on to connect with other resources in the community.
Now, we've all lost a loved one, and it's unbearable. Other than your church, are there community resources available to families whose mothers or daughters have gone missing or have been murdered?
Yeah, well, I was just actually thinking about that. Like in our community here in Edmonton, and I know in Calgary as well, there are connection to the MMIWG, which is for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women organization, and they have a toll-free number that you can call if you want to have counseling, if you want, it's 24 hours. If you want to talk to somebody, which is very, very good, because sometimes it can be, very detrimental in that family. So there is that, and there is also other resources around that has, it's an amnesty program as well. There's another one that is for missing and murdered Indigenous women that you can connect with, as well as Indigenous Women on the Front Lines, which is my organization, and Shepherd's House Ministries, which is a ministry here in Edmonton. But we also, communicate with people from across the country.
Now, you mentioned earlier that First Nations have different or unique ways of dealing with grief. Can you talk about the importance of the family in times of grief and great turmoil?
Oh, yeah, it's very, very key. A lot of times, the family members will come together. They won't always talk about what had happened, but they want to have, the fellowship, the closeness, the connection with other family members. It's very important, and having that support within the family is very, very key in the healing process, in regards to the trauma, in regards to the grief, and also being able to talk to other people, elders maybe, as well as counselors.
Now, it's very easy to dwell on grief and pains from the past. I lost my dad in 2003. It was very easy to dwell on that. And then I lost my mom right at the start of the pandemic. Do you have advice on healing and moving forward to a place of peace in the heart and mind?
Well, that's a very good question. I had lost my son during the beginning of the pandemic, and then also my father just actually in August. And I was really looking at ways of having support, ways of being able to deal with it. And I found the most important thing is to acknowledge that I went through a loss, to acknowledge that I am going through grief, and that I need to look at the areas that had been very key in my life with this person, this individual. And it helped me to grieve. It helped me to accept it and to move forward, because we do have to live our life as well, and we can't stay in that place, because that is also very dangerous when we stay in the place of grieving in our entire life, because it stunts our growth actually. So in the studies that I have done personally as a woman, going through missing different family members and helping people grieving, and my own grieving as well, it had taught me that. So I think that's a big indication, is to actually accept it, to look at it, and also to talk about it, to share about it with other folks. And I was able to do that with family members as well as a counselor.
And you mentioned that you've lost a loved one like in August. So can you tell us about how prayer and Bible reading has helped you personally through these hard times?
Well, the times that I was going through the prayer, I really believe that God had showed me the areas where I was not accepting the part of my relationship with that person, and the things where there was good memories as well. So all these good things began to happen in my life when I was accepting, these responsibilities in my life, and I began to accept the fact that there was nothing that I could do. It was his time. He was an elder. He had lived his life, a good life, and it was time to let go. So that was the biggest thing for me, was to be able to let go, and that he was in a better place now, to accept that, to talk about it, to communicate with somebody that would listen, that was going through actually the same kind of thing as myself. It was my daughter. And I began to relate to her the different things that I went through with my father, and the things that I was missing, the things that I wanted to hang on to, things I wanted to let go of as well. So that was wonderful. And then also, of course, the Bible reading as well, that was helping me. I actually began during that time. It was just a coincidence, in my mind, but I know it was God's will. And it was the daily Bible reading by the evangelist Billy Graham. And I began to go through all the daily Bible readings, and it was so neat how, each Bible reading, it would go in hand with what I was going through. So that was wonderful. And I still, go by that each day.
Pastor Manus, do these issues of grief and loss go to a deeper level of the spiritual part of our lives? And if so, how is the battle between light and darkness overcome?
I actually was touching a little bit about it, how it does affect us in a very deep way. Like if we do not let go of the grieving process, and if we don't accept it, because I remember in my own personal life when I didn't accept it, when I had lost a family member a few years ago, and I began to actually get physically sick from not accepting it. It can actually affect us physically, and I didn't want to. And I know at the time, that I was going through something, but I couldn't accept it. So when I did, like it was probably about 8 months later, then I began to realize, yeah, I need to grieve. I need to accept this. I need to cry a bit. I need to talk about it, go for counseling and for prayer. And when I began to do that, then I began to have a deeper sense of who I was at the time and what I was going through in my healing process. So it is very important that we do talk about it with somebody.
And yeah, we've talked about having a community around you to deal with grief and pain. And I guess looking at the circumstances of missing and murdered Indigenous women, that would be the same, like having a strong community around you. But Pastor Bernice, how do you feel the church and the message of the Christian religion can help with building a safe community?
Well, for myself and my family, we've had a very positive feedback with the church here in Edmonton. We have quite a few different churches where we have, connect. Because I'm a minister, I do connect with other ministers. So that was a wonderful resource for me and my family that has helped me. And, like I said, I'm involved with Regency's Shepherd's House and as well as Church in the Vine. So because of those ones, they have helped me quite a bit in my whole grieving aspect of the murdered and missing Indigenous women that were in my own personal life. I actually, in the first period when there was some murdered and missing women that were being talked about 20 years ago, was during the Picton murders. And one of my sister-in-laws was involved. So
Wow.
the church actually, really supported me during that time, was really there for me. And I went through a lot of counseling, a lot of prayer, and that really, really helped me.
And do you feel that you have seen what you consider the root causes of missing or murdered members of your community that are not being talked about?
Well, I would say that the root causes it varies, because I had done this whole investigation under Indigenous women on the front lines, and what we had found, myself and my family, and the different people I was working with, was there was different situations, because there was some girls, coming, they were just going on their way home. They got picked up by somebody, by a stranger. Pardon me. Other situations that had happened where there was, a girl, she's in college, she's in university. She got picked up by somebody she's never ever seen again. These kinds of situations. And one of the things that I had talked before was that it really troubled me, was that the fact that a lot of times these circumstances with these young girls and these women, their cases were never discussed. They were never brought out publicly. But when there was somebody else from another race, there would be an Amber Alert instantly. And I was like, what is going on here? This is not right. And of course, the time period for when somebody goes missing is very important for them to look into immediately. So that was something that I looked into. That was something that I was very troubled by. And also the fact that a lot of people were not aware of it until just recently. And one of the things that's very key is that we need to educate ourselves. We need to know more about it, what is really going on out there. Why is this happening to our women? Why is that happening? One of the biggest things is that there's a lot of ignorance. It's not spoken about enough. It is not looked at as an important factor in our society, that are murdered and missing Indigenous women, this is happening to them.
Now, historically speaking, there has been a lot of tension between the church and the Indigenous community. What has made you want to become a Christian minister?
Well, for myself, I actually had, at a very young age, when I was 5 years old, there was a wonderful Christian woman. She was Danish. She came from Denmark, and she came to this country, and God told her that she was going to minister to our people. And it was because of her reaching out. Her name was Mrs. Rasmussen. Her reaching out to our people. Her and her husband, they rented a apartment building in the same building that I was at. They rented apartments in there, and they would have weekly Sunday schools in there in our building. And they went from house to house, from apartment to apartment, asking the families. And my mom said, yes, I would love for my kids to be in Sunday school and also Bible school. So we were in there all the time, my brothers and my sisters and I, at a very young age. And that had affected me in a tremendous way. And I had seen it at a young age. Like when I became older and I was a teenager, we seen revival break out in our community. So that had a great impact upon our lives. And it was, during that time that the church really, really helped us to grow as individuals. And it was the First Nations community, of course, that was there, and the pastors, and they were talking a lot about, how God is with us, that God is for us, that God can help us in every area of our life. And it was such a tremendous time. And it still affects me to this day.
Well, Deborah, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking me. God bless you.
Volunteering is an important part of our community and how many local services are delivered to those in need. To talk more about the importance of volunteering in Lethbridge, Amanda Jensen joins me from Volunteer Lethbridge to tell us more about how volunteers are an integral part of our community. Amanda, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So first off, Amanda, can you give us a snapshot of how the Volunteer Lethbridge Association serves the community?
Yeah, Volunteer Lethbridge is I think of it as the glue for the nonprofit sector for anywhere south of Calgary. Really, we're the only umbrella organization that serves the sector through help with volunteer management, which is what comes to mind for most people when they think about Volunteer Lethbridge, but also through we're the advocates for the sector for policy or policy changes or changes in law. We often are the conveners of conversations that matter to our community, such as poverty reduction or diversity and inclusion, etc. And then the other thing that we do is we try to provide capacity building, training, experiences for the sector in Lethbridge, to raise all the boats.
Now, we talked a little bit before our interview about some challenges that nonprofits are facing right now. Can you tell us about some of these challenges?
Well, yeah, as we were saying, there's a tremendous increase in demand for services for the large majority of nonprofit organizations, which is also coming at a time of more scarce resources. It's probably not a surprise to hear that resources are becoming more and more scarce, and due to the way that most grant funding is set up, we really are put in a position of fighting over scraps. The pie is only so big, and so we're constantly in competition with each other, despite the appropriateness or the need for the mission or for the organization. So we're really at this yin and yang point, which was definitely exacerbated by the pandemic. Some of us were fortunate to get pandemic response dollars during those years from various levels of government, and those programs, you'll see many of those programs that were working and were built up during that time due to the extra influx of cash are now closing because the dollars just weren't sustainable.
And we talked about inflation, which is a hot button issue all across Canada. How is that impacting nonprofits?
Well, it's impacting us because money is scarce. So what we're looking for is investment from the business community, from various levels of government, but also from our neighbors into missions that matter to us. Whether it's whether cancer has touched your life and it's cancer research, or it's food banks, etc. When our basic needs are so hard to meet right now, the first thing that has to go are things that are not going to contribute to your immediate, survival. Mm-hmm. The other way that it, the idea of scarcity and tough times affect a volunteer center or a community, let's make it broader, a community, is we don't have time. We are often stuck in working more than one job, as you mentioned before, potentially doing a gig job to try to, to bring up the income to afford the groceries that have now, escalated in cost. So there's no time for a person to contribute to their community, to volunteer, to become involved in government in any way, to shovel a neighbor's walk, etc. So all of those things are lost when we are living in this this in scarcity.
And what can volunteers do to help with these challenges?
Well, I mean, we recognize volunteers as really the solution to helping nonprofit organizations with their human resource costs and to keep their human resource costs down, but also to bring different experiences, different perspectives to an organization that may not exist there through paid employment. But what volunteering also does on the other side of things is it's a mutually beneficial relationship for the nonprofit organization and for the volunteer. I know when I volunteer, I feel better about myself. I feel more connected to my community. I feel I'm gaining experiences that I'll be able to use again in another situation. There's so many reasons to volunteer. So it is so mutually beneficial to both the nonprofit organization and the person serving.
I know I've had a lot of fun doing volunteering, and it's just it's so rewarding. And then plus you're helping out like a very worthy cause when you're doing it. Amanda, can you walk us through the process of how one might become a volunteer?
Yes, I can. And it's changed. Volunteer Lethbridge has really changed its operating model almost 180 degrees since the beginning of the pandemic, just out of necessity and trying to meet people where they're at. So how a volunteer center traditionally runs is, what we think of is, we post opportunities and make them available to the community, and a potential volunteer then gets in touch with the organization and a match is made. But what that didn't allow was for us as a volunteer center to actually know what was happening in between, whether matches were made, how they went, whether it was a good fit, what the turnover is, etc. So we are now centralizing, I suppose, I would call it, volunteerism in our community, so that we do become the organization that not only does the promotion of opportunities, but we meet with people to try to, increase the probability of a successful volunteer relationship with a nonprofit organization, based on what they bring to the table, how much time they have, their experience, etc. But then we take this one step further where we're screening them as well. And screening is something that we don't talk about enough, I think, when we're talking about volunteerism, is making sure that the volunteer is going to be safe in their chosen role, and that the constituents that they're serving, the organization themselves, are going to be safe, bringing this person into their organization. So that's a major change that we've made, is taking that step, so that it frees up the volunteer manager's time on the other end. So by the time the volunteer arrives at their door, they're ready to be trained and onboarded.
And you talked about matching volunteers with organizations. Can someone request to volunteer for a specific charity?
Absolutely. We do have people who come and they know exactly what they want to do. They know they want to work weekends with, the shelter, or whatever it is, right? We just take away the administration then from that nonprofit organization, so that all of those admin costs and whatever screening is necessary is done by the time they get there. But then we can also be, that great person to, bounce ideas off of too. And, some volunteer opportunities we would never know exist that are just very unique and sort of under the surface. So this model also, I have to mention, allows for much freer movement of the volunteer in the community. So once they've been screened through Volunteer Lethbridge and want to try another volunteer opportunity, they can then go to that organization and show, the proof of screening from Volunteer Lethbridge, and all of that administration that would normally have to be doubled and happen again, is done. And you can also imagine the stress that is put on the Lethbridge Police Service or RCMP to continually be doing these criminal record checks, that we're removing all of that duplication.
Well, that sounds very efficient. And then, so how long does the application process take?
It can be really quick. Really, the only thing that we are a bit stymied by is the length of time for a police information check to be returned. It's taking about a month right now for that to happen, just administratively on the police services side. I know they're doing the best that they can, but that is for positions that require that level of screening. There are many other positions that are, work a casino for your charity, or, dishwash at this, gala event, or sell tickets or whatever. Those sorts of things can happen pretty quickly, pretty immediately, because the level of risk is so low for them to be, entering into that relationship with the nonprofit. So it really depends on the type of position that one is applying for.
And what about the family? Can a whole family work together as volunteers in an organization?
Absolutely. What a beautiful thing to do together. We've spent a couple of Saturdays, my family, with the YWCA and the Lethbridge Food Bank in preparing meals for their clientele and freezer meals. And so my kids are learning, and me, learning how to use a knife properly, learning how to cut, listening to music, just spending time together. And then we have this product at the end of the morning. It's a beautiful activity. And then there's plenty of others just like it.
And how is Volunteer Lethbridge funded? Where do the funds come from?
We get most of our funding is provincial at the moment through 2 operating grants. The rest, as an executive director, a lot of my time is spent looking for more opportunities, looking for grants, looking for programs that might fit. Sometimes we have to do that in order to bring new monies in. And then fundraising events and gifts from individuals who believe in our mission. We are a member-driven organization, so we do have, small income from memberships. So at any given time, we have between 100 and 150 nonprofit organizations that are paying to use our services.
And who are some of the organizations that Volunteer Lethbridge works with?
Volunteer Lethbridge is in a very unique position in that we are the capacity builders for other nonprofits that span the spectrum of age, whether it's sport, whether it's art, theater, social services, etc. We are blessed in that we can serve the whole swath of nonprofit organizations in the community and really be representative of the opportunities that are out there for the various interests that people have. So we're in a unique position in that we're not doing the work, but we get to support that work that's happening in the community across all parts of the nonprofit world.
Great. And what are some challenges right now that the people of Lethbridge can help with?
Oh my, let's call them opportunities. There are so many opportunities. I mean, I often think of the difficulty that the arts and culture sector had during the pandemic. They were hit tremendously hard, as you can well imagine.
Yes.
And are now trying to come out of that and see if it's going to return to pre-pandemic levels. But I would say an easy thing to do would be to support art and culture, sell tickets, sell merchandise, put up posters, buy tickets to events, gift things like that, rather than something from a big box store, that sort of thing. Coach a sports team. Like those are more formal volunteer opportunities, but what we don't capture through this organization and probably can't is what happens with you haven't seen your neighbor in a few days and knocking on the door or shoveling the walk or taking a meal, etc. There are so many ways that we serve that are unnoticed or don't have this process behind it that we're talking about. So there's innumerable ways to get involved.
And Amanda, I'm going to give you an opportunity to brag a bit. Can you tell us some of the successes Volunteer Lethbridge has had over the years?
Oh, yes, I can. I've only been here since the beginning of the pandemic, but I can tell you that the former executive directors built up an incredible organization that is very trusted by the community. I can tell you, since I've been here, changing that operating model is I can't overstate what a big deal it is in terms of providing better service to the volunteers, better service to our nonprofit organizations, and therefore the community. And I will say that this operating model is being watched very closely by provincial counterparts and federal counterparts to see how it works. And so I do expect the next couple of years with this organization to continue to be revolutionary, to be a leader and a wayfinder for the sector that specifically serves volunteers. So it's a really exciting time to be here. Also, really believe so strongly in how technology can make our lives easier and make the connections between nonprofits and potential volunteers in its community more accessible. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting things that unfold over the next while.
Well, Amanda, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You as well. That was Amanda Jensen with Volunteer Lethbridge. I'm Naveen Day, and on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.